A serious objection is, what if Medjugorje is false? Are we putting our souls in danger by going there or listening to the messages of Medjugorje? This is something I think that is present in many people's minds. Because even if it's unapproved and Holy Mother Church needs our going there as pilgrims to help her discern whether this is true or not, well, what if it's fake? Am I in any danger going to Medjugorje? Am I putting my faith in danger by going there? Now to this, I want to give a quote from Archbishop André Joseph Léonard, the Archbishop of Brussels, and he was the former primate of Belgium. And he says, I quote, "I know bishop friends whose rule of behavior is to say, look out, if we are open to the events of Medjugorje, we can perhaps encourage something that is not authentic. There exists a risk. I am more sensitive to the opposite risk and say, just the same, it is possible that heaven has spoken to people at that place, and I do not wish to take the risk of a priori being closed to that grace. Two risks exist. The risk that we are being deceived in Medjugorje and the risk that we are bypassing a gift of grace. Until the judgment of the Church, between the two risks, I prefer to take the risk of being open rather than the risk of a priori being closed to the grace of God, which can be operating in this place. Accordingly, therefore, I take the position of openness and prudence." Notice what the Archbishop says, openness and prudence. Prudence is practical wisdom. So he's basically saying there are two risks in Medjugorje. There's the one risk, it could be fake. And although he doesn't fully spell it out, if it's fake, people are being deceived. And what are they being deceived into? Praying the rosary every day, going to Mass, reading the Bible, fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays, and going to confession at least once a month. They're deceived into living a sacramental life more fully. Really, if that's a deception, oh, happy deception. Would that the whole world were deceived in this way. And of course, the other risk he's saying is that it could be a grace from God, and that there's a greater risk, it's a greater danger to be closed a priori to the grace of God, to say, well, nope, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. But if it is from God, we're risking bypassing God's grace. And I think to this, I'd also want to add some Dominican wisdom. You know, my brothers, when I first started going there as a priest with the laity, they asked me a few questions about Medjugorje. How do people behave at Mass and adoration? What are confessions like in Medjugorje? And the behavior of priests in general in Medjugorje. And when I answered these questions, they said, clearly God's grace is at work in this place. We must cooperate with this. I remember I was at adoration. Adoration in the evenings in the summer is at the back of church, and there's seating for 7,500 people. So roughly I'd calculate there were about 10,000 people kneeling down in silence, adoring our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament in the monstrance. And there was an African priest next to me, and he looked out, because you see the priests are sitting on one side in the sanctuary, and the people are all down there on the other side. And he looked at the crowds of people and he said, now I know Medjugorje is real. When he saw how people were adoring our Lord, and 10,000 people in silence adoring Jesus. I don't think you can fake that. You can't fake that. And you have to have your eyes open to see God's grace at work where He chooses to work. It's not for us to decide whether the apparitions are true or not. Holy Mother Church will tell us when she's good and ready. But in the meantime, we're not blind. We can see God's grace is at work here. All the conversions taking place, so many conversions. I've heard some people kind of minimize it and say, oh yeah, people go to Medjugorje and have a little kind of pick-me-up. I think you have to be willfully blind to say that. There are authentic conversions taking place. People's lives are transformed. People are turning back to Christ. If we can see God's grace is at work there, then we have to say, well, we have to cooperate with God's grace and be open to it.